The Huns began to straften, couldn't make it out at all. Especially when the tanks began the caterpillar crawl. And the tanks went on and they strolled along with an independent air. And their guns began to blare, and the Huns began to swear. But they pulled the trees up by the roots and made...
So here we are on the eastern flank of 5 Company. There have been one section coming down this way in column. Just behind the hedge here on this side there's a little gully, and there's the railway line. And where this track is here, I've got a track here going up the hill here. I think that would roughly be where the German outpost line would be. And if you look right over there, you can just see the tops of the trees of the present day Calais wood. So it would be getting quite hot now, I think, during the battle. A Second Lieutenant Peel, who was commanding B-31 on this side, he recalls quite a nervous moment when the barbed wire got caught up in the tracks of the tank, and he ripped the unditching beam and the vaccine off his tank. And when it did that, when that fell off, it damaged one of his machine guns in the process. That must have been quite a hairy moment. But on the other hand, perhaps the Hindenburg line, the trenches weren't so deep here because they made it over the Hindenburg line in the end. So and they actually came across not really that much resistance in this area actually. One of the other tank commanders, Second Lieutenant Chick, he recalls being asked by the infantry to actually put down some fire on the observation line here for some Germans. He was asked to do that by the infantry, and apparently that was successful because after his action suppressing the German infantry, they actually gave up and they were taken prisoner. So, according to the maps, where this track is, that's roughly where the actual Hindenburg front line was. And I don't think that's far wrong. If you look out across what's now these field of crops, it's quite they've got quite a good view up here of what's coming at them from the south. I think maybe they've got a good 400-500 meters view, and of course you have to remember they were in well prepared trenches here, and where you see these field of crops, that would actually be fields of barbed wire back then. So a very good position, and I can quite imagine that the Germans would be feeling quite confident sitting here, especially since until then there'd hardly been any attack on the lines. Out of view of the camera, just down there is the sewage works, and that would also have been wood in the time. And in the memoirs of a Second Lieutenant Thompson, he was a commander of B-22, and he was in a section of tanks that were working their way up along the western side of the wood. And he recalls the use of his vaccine. The vaccine was lashed to the roof of the tank in such a way that when set in motion, it would move forward onto the tank tracks, and it would be carried forward and dropped into the trench. Inside the tank, close to the officer's seat, was a chain connected to the release mechanism on the roof. First, the tank had to be positioned square onto the trench. and as it then was edged slowly forward, the tank commander had to gauge the right moment to pull the chain so that the vaccine would be pushed over the trench and end up flat on the bottom. Luck played a greater part in the affair than judgment, and as far as I was concerned, that was certainly the case, for we dropped it just right on the day. We hit the vaccine right, but none of us are likely to forget the climb. It was so steep that it taxed the engine to its capacity. The driver, a first-class man, had to take us up slowly and correct and overcome several side slips. The whole of the time, all I could see was the sky above, and the crew, of course, could see nothing. Finally, we came to the point of balance, and slowly the nose dropped and we eased gently forward onto the firm ground again. Quite an experience, don't you think? So here we are on the most forward edge of the blue line. So the Hindenburg line is over there somewhere, maybe 200 yards further on. This is the village of Ribecourt behind us. This was absolutely the west boundary of 6 Battalion's area that they had to attack. So somewhere around here, 5 and 6 Company would have got together and sorted themselves out for the next phase of the attack. Actually, 6 Company made it to this point with 11 of the 12 tanks, not 12 what I said earlier. One tank actually broke down with engine problem for a short while during the attack, so he didn't actually meet up here until a bit later. 5 Company, they actually made it to the rally point with 10 tanks because 2 tanks got ditched on the way. So at this point what would be happening now is that 2 tanks from 6 Company would have been allocated to move across to 5, so they would be back up to their full complement of 12 tanks ready for their next phase. So while all this was going on, 4 Company, who hadn't been in the front line just yet, they were trundling on behind them, gone over the same wire that the lead companies had done. They'd gone over the other vaccines, hadn't used their vaccines yet, and it was now time for 4 Company to lead the attack on the 2nd Hindenburg line. Okay, with the front Hindenburg line secured, it's now time to attack the 2nd Hindenburg line, and that would have been over there somewhere, perhaps where those fields of rape are over there. And 4 Company, they lined up their tanks 12 abreast, and they moved forward and went into the attack. One of the section commanders, Captain Groves, has actually recalled quite a hairy incident that he had during this particular phase of the battle. I led my tanks down the slope, being about 100 yards in front, so he led them on foot, right? However, suddenly all around my feet a machine gun put several bursts of fire. I took off and leapt into the leading tank, which was a 6-pounder. They had the door open, and as I slid backwards into the tank, a bullet missed my nose by a fraction. I felt the air as it nearly hit my nose. It cut the head of a bolt in half, which I still have today. And later on he says, my section of tanks, which I commanded, went through to the final objective between Ribecourt and Marconing, arriving there, if my memory serves me right, about 8:30 in the morning, or a bit later. My tank was Black Prince with Lieutenant 2 as crew commander, and the other 2 tanks were named Bullock and Bystander, commanded by Lieutenant Chambers and Goodall. The policy of the section commander and an officer crew commander being in one tank was later discontinued, casualties proving too costly. The wire pulling tanks had cleared great gaps in the 2 50-yard deep belts of barbed wire for the cavalry exploitation. The infantry of the Durham Light Infantry had 3 men wounded by the time we arrived at the final objective. On the way, one of my tanks stopped, but within a minute it was moving again. I shall never forget the cheer the infantry gave on that occasion. We carried a spare brake box with the make or break mechanism. This was quickly exchanged in approximately 30 seconds once the diagnosis was correct. So if you remember right back to some of the skills that tank crews should have according to the military, they should have mechanical aptitude, and in situations like this is where that comes in really handy. So here we are now, we're now on the brown line, roughly where that rapeseed field is. That would have been the Hindenburg line. On the other side there in the field there's actually a concrete bunker, the remains of a concrete bunker, and I'm assuming that's from the First World War, because that is roughly where the Hindenburg line would be. So the tanks of 4 Company, they would have attacked from just beyond that ridge line, roughly where those trees now are. They would have come over the crest line and attacked us line abreast. But in this particular attack towards the 2nd Hindenburg line, this was where actually they lost their first 2 tanks to enemy fire. A 2nd Lieutenant Jones was commanding his tank when he saw his section commander stop on some high ground around here with what he thought was mechanical problem. So he jumped out of his tank, went across to the section commander's tank, opened the sponson door and just told him, hey, while you're broke down, we're going to continue. Is that all right? Yeah, that's okay. Shut the sponson door, went back to his own tank. About a minute later, that section commander's tank blew up. One of the few remaining German artillery batteries, no guns, had hit it, and the section commander, the tank commander and a corporal were killed. Also during this attack, another tank was also knocked out, and a 3rd tank actually ditched. So of the 12 tanks that attacked, only 9 from 4 Company made it to the rally point in this particular area.